Moving on, Harvey Weinstein was found guilty of three more sexual assault charges in Los Angeles. Boy, bye. And there seems to be a report on abortions, fewer abortions. Vasectomy has seen an uptick. So I guess men are stepping to the plate on the heels of this hot topic abortion issue. And the TSA has reported, in light of all the airline travels, unprecedented amount of guns attempting to be brought onto flights. What say you?
Wow. Vasectomy's going up. You better get that snip, snip, son. Better get that snip, snip. I think that's not a surprise at all. I think the
Should men be stepping up and getting snipped?
yes, but again, the folks of means always had access to safe abortions.
And always will.
Are if you're rich in one of these states that passed an abortion ban, you can just fly, someone who has an unwanted pregnancy to California and get a safe abortion. It's all the other people, so
It's always the other
maybe
people. The people with resources will always have resources. They'll always have a way. They'll jump on a flight and go to another country. Who cares? It's the people who don't have the resources, the raped teenager in the Bible Belt, the preteen that's being pimped out by a parent, pregnancies being as a result of date rapes or incest. I mean, there's just so much on the gamut with regard to that. And it's deeply disappointing that as of date, with all of our concerns around the women's reproductive system, that there's not one single law on the books that speaks to what a man can do with his body. For me, it's always about equity. I think most issues that I take issue with, it's about the equity. If you're going to be all over women about their personal autonomy, then I think men should be held to the same standards.
That's a great call out. I completely missed the irony there and the double standard. You're absolutely right.
That's pretty much the main issue of it for me. Why is it that we can't seem to be a society that focuses on equity rather than equality? Because there is no real such thing as equality. We're not all equal. We all have different gifts. We have different talents. We have different skills. Equity allows all of us to thrive because of it.
I disagree.
What say you?
Equity, how do you determine what each person should get in order to thrive? Equity sounds great, but you have to have someone doing some kind of central planning to make that determination, which, in our previous conversations about bloated bureaucracies, you have some bean counter deciding how much more or less you should receive in order to get equity. And oftentimes prioritizing equity over equality leads to prioritizing desired outcomes instead of prioritizing making sure everybody has an opportunity. We aren't all equal in terms of our
But I think equity does that. I think equity creates a platform for everybody to have an opportunity based on their personal skill set, not a standardized set of skill sets that we're trying to squeeze everybody into.
But who makes that determination of what you should get based on your skill set? Some bean counter in some basement in some government office somewhere.
Well, if we were as smart as we all thought we were, it would probably be a panel of child psychologists, philosophers, teachers, education professionals, and I would say psychologists.
And the day you cite that you create that, an hour later, 100 consulting companies will pop up to help people hack that shit.
And welcome to capitalism.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm more on the equality thing, because equality you actually have a better chance of getting. As long as you make sure everyone has that equality of opportunity, you make sure there's accountability for folks that are unfairly not getting their shot at equal opportunity. As long as you make sure there's accountability for people that are infringing upon everyone's rights, that's the
Do you mean access to resources? You mean access to resources? It's one thing for the resources to be there, but there is a lack of equality in the access to them.
I believe the private sector is going to do a better job of can do a better job of trying to make sure there's equal access to those resources, with some help, but not with a completely centrally planned institution that is controlling the access to those resources. But that is also another conversation for another time. And I think we should possibly even bring in Adina to talk about this as
Okay.
she works with a number of voting groups and works on equity. And I'm sure you two have very similar views here. And I would love to talk more about it, because it's a more philosophical kind of discussion,
Mhm. Yeah,
because we're
agreed.
getting into what kind of society that we want, and providing incentives for people and whatnot.
And I think we need
But
to
this is
clearly
good.
define the difference between equality and equity, or at least for the purposes of this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I like it.
Okay, fair enough.
Thought a little bit more about it. I misspoke when I say the private sector can do a better job of equality. The government needs to be there to ensure equality is happening, especially when it comes to access to resources, because we've known what the private sector does when there's no government enforcement when it comes to access to resources. You need the government to make sure that there's equality and make sure that people are getting equal access to the resources that they should have access to just as a citizen. So, for example, you need the government to make sure people aren't being denied business loans or housing mortgages because they're Black, because they're gay, because they're Jewish, because they're Asian, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that falls under equality rather than equity. But
Okay.
we can put a pause on that. I did want to clarify that, though, because of course it's incredibly fucking stupid to say, oh, the private sector is better at doing equality. We have empirical data of more than 100 years showing how good the private sector handles equality, and we know what that leads to. Come on.
Well, it leads to people of color not making it up to management roles. That we know.
Yeah,
There's an overabundance of them in the mailroom, though.
Yeah. It leads to things like Donald Sterling, the billionaire former owner of the Los Angeles Clippers.
Sure did, who had to sell his team because he got caught on a hot mic talking to his ex-girlfriend, calling people all kinds of names, huh? Calling Black people specifically.
But he made his money in real estate, and he was found to be in violation of people's civil rights. He was not letting Black people rent properties that he owned, essentially. And the government had to come in to ensure equality, and they made him pay a giant fine. You know how it goes: admission of no wrongdoing after an investigation, pay a fine, blah blah blah. But he did have to do that.
Okay, fair enough. And he did have to sell his percentage of the team.
Yes, because he's a scumbag.
Right, as he should. So peace to you. And I'm not sure why other owners have been able to skate by without similar consequences.
Yes, indeed.